guns, bombs, tanks, just overall general killing.
They're going to take us to an underground bunker somewhere and tie power batteries to our nuts.
Ooh, I'm the CIA.
Had any links to the CIA? And if that backed into the Iran-Contra deal?
He has a point.
He's training soldiers. Soldiers to guard the heroin trade.
Now, for all intents and purposes, terrorism in this country officially began with the Pan Am 103 crash in 1988. Now, during this time, there have been minor terrorist acts. Small bombings, kidnappings, but not the big stuff, okay? So today, we're only going to discuss when the mother lode arrived on our soil. On February 26, 1993, a bomb went off in the World Trade Center. 6 people were killed and thousands were injured. The idea was to knock the North Tower into the South Tower so both would fall onto Wall Street. But that date is important. Do you know what that date signifies?
It's the 2nd anniversary of the end of the Gulf War.
And who was blamed for that attack?
Muslim extremists.
Ramzi Youssef, Muslim extremist. Former Mujahideen fighter Ramzi Youssef entered the country on an Iraqi passport. Now, he was sentenced to death by Manhattan Federal Court on September 11th, 1996. Are we beginning to see a pattern here?
These Arabs sure have an affinity for anniversaries.
Someone sure does. Now, what is their obsession with the World Trade Center? Well, you'll remember that we were all told that the World Trade Center was a target for terrorism because of one reason. It was the home base of the U.S. economy. But then we're told at the same time that the terrorists targeted us because of our values, because of our freedoms.
So why bomb the World Trade Center when structures like the Statue of Liberty or the Washington Monument are far brighter beacons of freedom?
Why indeed? I warrant that the first World Trade Center attack was a staged event, a psyop, its sole purpose being to shine a light on the World Trade Center towers, to convince people that they were future targets of terrorism.
I do recall all of the counterterrorism pundits after 9/11 saying, quote, Al-Qaeda always wanted to finish the job.
Oh, I'll get to the counter-terrorists in a little bit, but your point is well taken. But wait, how do we know that the 93 bombing wasn't Al-Qaeda, Like everything, we don't exactly know, but in hindsight it makes the most sense. And here's why. After 93, a series of terrorist attacks plagued the U.S. As we move through this, you will begin to understand how specific agendas within specific parts of government, media, and industry have created a propaganda campaign to wage war. With 9/11 as the prime selling point. There was the OKC bombing in 95, the embassy bombings in Africa in 1998, the USS Kroll in 2000 in Yemen, and then, of course, there was 9/11.
There's an anomaly in there. All of the attacks you just mentioned were blamed on Al-Qaeda, except for OKC.
However, there is a connection. Timothy McVeigh's lawyer claims that he and Terry Nichols were not the only 2 people who planned the OKC bombing. He contends that Nichols made several trips to the Philippines in the years before the bombings and met with Ramzi Youssef. McVeigh served in the Gulf War, and Youssef entered the country with an Iraqi passport. Coincidence? Conspiracy! McVeigh and Nichols both visited Al-Qaeda training camps in the Philippines after the Gulf War. Now, at McVeigh's trial, significant evidence came out that either Al-Qaeda, Iraqi intelligence, or both assisted in the OKC bombings. And more importantly, hundreds of thousands of documents were withheld by the FBI from McVeigh's attorneys. The director of the FBI at that time was Louis Freeh. Now, no one knows what these documents contain, but they very well could have had evidence that McVeigh, Nichols, and other conspirators planned the OKC bombing. See, that doesn't make any sense. Why wouldn't the government want to blame Al-Qaeda for OKC? Because it wasn't 9/11. Neither was the first World Trade Center bombing. You have to realize that the planning for 9/11 was years in advance, maybe even decades. All of the terrorist activity leading up to it, they're just little side notes, little warnings of what was to come. So OKC is part of a larger plan. Exactly. All part of the same psyop.
What's a psyop?
A PSYOP is a clandestine intelligence operation. Okay, they are used to shift people's perceptions to a predefined agenda.
PSYOPs are used in conjunction with more overt actions called military ops. So PSYOPs are conducted by taking an already established belief and then creating something false around that to take advantage of it.
So you can see how easily a PSYOP could have been created surrounding 9/11.
You begin by teaching Muslims a new version of Islam, full of violence and extremist beliefs. This sets up one part of the PSYOP, the patsies. Then, over the years, you slowly mold the patsies into a fully functioning military operation. Guns, bombs, tanks, the works.
Now, the patsies hate you, but they have no idea that you are the one supporting them, because you use an intermediary, someone they believe is on their side. And at the same time, well, you have your thumb on the patsies, right? You filter out information to the public that the patsies are the ones planning the attacks.
So when the attacks happen, it is so easy to convince the public the patsies are at fault. But on the flip side, the patsies are doing nothing but talking tough and just committing smaller, less devastating attacks, while you yourself conduct the military op and carry out the more destructive major strikes.
So with carefully executed planning and initiatives in place to keep it all secret, you have all the makings for a military intelligence PSYOP on 9/11.
And OKC fits in how?
Al-Qaeda is not the only enemy in this war on terror. Ever since this country's inception, a much larger, deeper, darker threat has existed against the powers that be. Dissent.
Oklahoma City, it shone a light on militia groups and cults that were bent on dismantling the U.S. government, typically through military action. You know, it convinced the public that anyone who wanted to take down the U.S. government was as crazy as Timothy McVeigh.
Or Kaczynski.
The media rarely offers a favorable view of dissent. Only the people who want to destroy the world are ever covered. So just like the WTO convention, the protests in Seattle in '99, OKC discredited any movement questioning the federal government. Anyone questioning the real motives behind 9/11 would automatically be grouped in with people like McVeigh and Nichols, just by association and without even saying a word.
So OKC was blamed on domestic terrorists as a means of stomping down dissent in this country.
All in preparation for 9/11.
So who was running the PSYOP?
Have you ever heard of a company called Kroll Associates?
The name sounds familiar.
Oh, I guarantee you have seen Kroll on television. They are champions of counterterrorism.
This is where the counter-terrorists come in?
Maybe they didn't run the PSYOP, but they sure as hell did cover it up. My friend, Kroll was bigger than you could possibly imagine. Kroll Associates is a global securities and intelligence firm. Publicly traded and privately managed, Kroll specializes in large building security and industrial espionage. In 1993, Kroll got a contract to manage security at the World Trade Center. They held that position up until the moment the towers fell. The current CEO of Kroll is Michael Cherkasky. Cherkasky is a former assistant district attorney under Robert Morgenthau in Manhattan. The former employees of Kroll include people like William Bratton, a former police commissioner in Boston and New York City, and now chief of the LAPD. And then, of course, there's Brian Jenkins.
Based out of Los Angeles, Jenkins is the country's foremost expert on aviation terrorism.
Now working for the powerful think tank, the RAND Corporation, out of Los Angeles, Jenkins is a noted counterterrorism pundit and appears on many talk shows and news magazines.